yeah, it's that weird thing. But I think I did it because it would actually allow me not to talk. It was like, reverse medication, while they did.
These stars didn't just dance with their demons. They were consumed by them. Here are 15 of the worst drug addicts from the golden age of Hollywood. Number 15. Howard Hughes. Forget about the industry or America. Back in the day, Mr. Hughes was one of the richest and most influential people in the world. He was an American aerospace engineer, business magnate, investor, philanthropist, and aircraft pilot. But though he's best known for his exploits in the aviation industry, Howard Hughes first gained prominence as a film producer. He dominated Hollywood in the late 1920s as a film tycoon, producing high-budget and often controversial films like The Racket in 1928 and 1932's Scarface. A few years later, in 1948, Howard Hughes acquired RKO Pictures, one of the big five studios of Hollywood's golden age. However, the studio struggled under his control and eventually shut down in 1957. Before that, he founded the Hughes Aircraft Company in 1932, driven by his passion for aviation and aerospace. As a pilot, Hughes spent a lot of time flying and testing, but a nasty crash occurred in 1946 while testing a photo reconnaissance plane. Crashing hard into a Beverly Hills residential area, Hughes broke several bones and herniated spinal discs, but he survived, albeit in constant pain. Turning to prescribed morphine as pain relief, Hughes later developed a lifelong addiction. He also took a lot of opiates and massive doses of narcotics for several years. Plagued by his addiction and personal struggles, Hughes became reclusive, spending over 4 months in a darkened screening room at his studio. He barely left, surviving on chocolate bars, chicken, and milk while obsessively stacking and rearranging dozens of Kleenex boxes around him. Hughes would write detailed memos to his aides, instructing them not to look at or speak to him unless he initiated the conversation. During this time, he remained in his 250-square-foot bedroom, mostly naked and fixated in his chair, watching movies and negotiating purchases. When he finally emerged in the summer of 1958, Hughes was in a terrible condition. He was emaciated. At more than 6 feet tall, he weighed between 115 and 120 pounds. His hygiene? Probably worse. Despite his extreme obsession with germs, Hughes never allowed the housekeepers at the Desert Inn to clean his room. His uncut fingernails spiraled and his long gray hair hung to his shoulders. After years of mental and physical decline, Hughes died of kidney failure in 1976.
Let me see those now. Give me a little smile. They're really growing, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you wear this when you do?
TV shows, yes.
Number 14. Drew Barrymore. Close your eyes and imagine you're a Hollywood star with riches, fame, and power all at your fingertips. It feels good, doesn't it? Who wouldn't get paid millions for acting out a script? But what if I told you the industry has a dark side that's almost impossible to get away from? Guys, celebrities are not immune to substance misuse and addiction. The pressures of fame, such as relentless paparazzi attention, the inability to go unnoticed in public, and constant media scrutiny, create unique challenges that most people never experience. And Drew Barrymore lived through it all. A member of the Barrymore family of actors, she has received several awards and nominations, including a Golden Globe Award and 9 Emmy Award nominations. However, her walk to fame began in 1982, when she was just 7 years old. Remember her breakout role in the Steven Spielberg classic E.T. the Extraterrestrial? She proved that lightning can indeed strike twice in Firestarter 2 years later. Fame and its pressures came shortly after, including a dance with nasty addictions. Her autobiography revealed that she started drinking alcohol at 9, smoking cannabis at 10, and was already doing cocaine by 12. Drew Barrymore had an absent mother, so she had to face the challenges of Hollywood stardom on her own, which was pretty sad, given that she was just a child. This lack of stability and guidance played a significant role in Drew's increasing substance misuse. By her teenage years, Barrymore was deeply addicted to cocaine and alcohol, a lifestyle that severely impacted her physical and mental well-being. This led to numerous hospitalizations and downtimes, straining her relationships and jeopardizing her once promising career. Thankfully, the sun rose once again. Initially hesitant to identify herself as someone with a substance use disorder, Barrymore eventually acknowledged the seriousness of her struggles through therapy and group sessions. They provided her with tools and coping mechanisms to deal with triggers and cravings. In recovery, she addressed the deep emotional challenges driving her addiction, including low self-esteem, unresolved resentment, and a constant need for validation. She also found solace and strength in building a support network of friends in recovery and mentors who understood her struggles. Unfortunately, not everyone could survive the dark side of the industry. Literally. Number 13. Marilyn Monroe. In early August 1962, headlines across the globe erupted with shocking news. Marilyn Monroe, one of Hollywood's brightest stars, if not the brightest, was found lifeless in her Brentwood, Los Angeles bedroom. Worse, she was just 36 years old. Nearly every newspaper, television station, and radio broadcast worth their salt clamored on how Marilyn's bedside table was filled with an array of medications, including sedatives, tranquilizers, stimulants, sleeping pills, and an empty vial of a powerful barbiturate called Nembutal. In her final weeks, Marilyn was using, and possibly abusing, a variety of substances, including barbiturates, amphetamines, opiates, the sedative Librium, and alcohol. But why? Feeling lonely, anxious, and stressed, Marilyn struggled with insomnia. So, to help her sleep, the actress would often break open a Nembutal capsule for quicker absorption, take a chloral hydrate tablet, and wash it all down with a glass of champagne. But here's the thing. Marilyn was taking the worst possible combination. Each drug amplified the effects of the others, making it more dangerous. In fact, people using this mix often lose track of how much they'd already taken, causing them to take more and then accidentally overdose. By 1960, Monroe had earned a reputation for being challenging on set, often causing delays by arriving late and struggling to remember her lines. Worse, the directors froze her out. Despite being Truman Capote's top choice to portray Holly Golightly in the film adaptation of Breakfast at Tiffany's, Paramount Pictures rejected her for fear that her involvement would complicate the production. In the years after her death, Marilyn's legacy has become clouded with a growing number of conspiracy theories and exaggerated stories. Questions abound. Who was she trying to contact before her final moments? Was her death the result of foul play? Were the Kennedys, the Mafia, the CIA, or even the Communist Party involved? Each new theory seems more outlandish than the last. Yet, due to the mysterious circumstances surrounding her death, the true details may never be known. What we are sure of, though, is that Marilyn Monroe tragically lost her life to the pressures of the industry. The same can be said about our next Golden Age figure.
Flows through her veins. She will live through the centuries to come. As I...
Number 12. Bela Lugosi. It's sad to see how the complexities and addictions of Bela Lugosi's personal life have overshadowed his career. Back in the Golden Age, an era where the industry's brightest stars came to life, Bela Lugosi shone like 1,000. He dominated the horror niche and can even be stated to be its pioneer. In 1927, he acted as Count Dracula in a Broadway adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, which eventually led him to settle in Hollywood. 4 years later, he starred in the 1931 film version of Dracula, directed by Todd Browning and produced by Universal Pictures. Fame and success? Guaranteed. Throughout the 1930s, Lugosi became a significant figure in horror films, but his fame as Dracula and his thick Hungarian accent restricted the roles available to him, despite his efforts to break free from typecasting. Lugosi was openly frustrated by being confined to mad scientist roles, largely due to his difficulty with speaking English more clearly. Studios continued to employ him, mainly to capitalize on his name recognition and prevent other actors from taking similar roles. Despite frequently teaming up with Boris Karloff, Lugosi's significant roles were limited to The Black Cat in 1934, The Raven in 1935, and Son of Frankenstein in 1939. Making things worse was the fact that in The Raven, where Lugosi played the lead, Karloff still received top billing. By this time, Lugosi was regularly receiving medication for sciatic neuritis, which led to his addiction to doctor-prescribed morphine and methadone. His increasing drug dependence, combined with worsening alcoholism, became noticeable to producers. But here's where things get interesting. Though Lugosi himself stated that he had been dependent on drugs for almost 3 decades, many believe he actually exaggerated the story. Sure, he was a heavy addict, but his life was not as bad as he so often portrayed. Should the rumors be right, the exaggeration of his dependency on drugs would likely have been aimed at his 4th wife, so she would feel guilty, reconcile with him, and come back to him. Lugosi died of a heart attack on the 16th of August, 1956, in the bedroom of his Los Angeles apartment while taking a nap. He was buried wearing one of the Dracula capes and his full costume, as well as his Dracula ring. Number 11. Edie Sedwick. When it comes to 1960s celebrities, only a few come close to Edie Sedwick. She was a celebrity to celebrities and very talented. She was an actress, model, and socialite who starred in several Andy Warhol short films. However, despite being one of the brightest luminaries in entertainment at the time, Edie Sedwick was a remarkable person at heart. She was inspirational, elegant, and very composed. But despite her colorful character and charm, she battled severe demons. She came from a chaotic rich family deeply rooted in mental issues. She was also a drug addict, an alcoholic, and anorexic. In 1966, Sedgwick had a turbulent and intense relationship with Bob Newworth, and during this period, she grew more dependent on barbiturates. Edie also took diet pills to manage her anorexia. These pills, which are similar to amphetamines, suppressed her appetite and stimulated her nervous system. But though it made her eat in the short term, it put her at greater risk of long-term harm due to her already fragile physical state. Edie also relied on depressants, particularly barbiturates and benzodiazepines, which she combined with alcohol. These drugs made her feel sleepy, disoriented, and numbed the pain of her loneliness. Her fear of being alone, possibly linked to a personality disorder, made her increasingly dependent on depressants throughout her life. It wasn't long before Edie barreled through her whole inheritance, spending it on fancy dinners, expensive alcohol every day, a costly wardrobe, and drugs, the latter of which she could no longer afford when she ran out of money. In desperate need of quick cash, Edie stole antiques and artwork from her grandmother's apartment, selling them for drugs. Returning home for the holidays while under the influence, her mother sent her to a psychiatric ward. Edie was unstable, chain-smoking, abusing appetite-suppressing amphetamines and energy boosters, consuming excessive alcohol on an empty stomach, and using heroin to counter the effects of speed. The latter restricted blood from reaching certain areas of her brain and made her speech stutter and halt. She died in her sleep on the night of November 15, 1971. Her death certificate listed the immediate cause as probable acute barbiturate intoxication due to alcohol poisoning. She was just 28 years old.
The games we play as quickly as I can change them. Who can make me happy, and I do not wish to be happy. And yes, I do wish to be happy.
Number 10. Elizabeth Taylor. Saying Elizabeth Taylor is one of the greatest Golden Age actresses is a massive understatement. She started her career as a child actress in the early 1940s and became one of the biggest stars of classic Hollywood cinema in the 1950s. By the 1960s, she was the highest-paid movie star globally, maintaining her status as a prominent public figure throughout her life. Why wouldn't the American Film Institute rank her 7th on its list of the greatest female screen legends? Throughout her career, Elizabeth Taylor's personal life was constantly in the media spotlight. She married 8 times to 7 different men, converted to Judaism, faced multiple serious health challenges, and lived a glamorous lifestyle. Taylor also amassed one of the world's most expensive private jewelry collections. However, she was also one of the industry's most notorious addicts. The Hollywood legend consumed so many pills in the 1980s that a medical expert who reviewed her files assumed she was dead because the dosages were incompatible with life. Between 1983 and 1988, 3 of Elizabeth Taylor's doctors wrote a total of 1,000 prescriptions for 28 different drugs, including tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and painkillers. At one point, her situation became so severe that Taylor, known for her surprising romantic relationships, asked her son to inject her with the powerful synthetic opioid Demerol. In the last 2 decades of her life, Elizabeth Taylor's health continued to deteriorate, and she rarely appeared at public events after 1996. She faced multiple health challenges, including serious bouts of pneumonia in 1990 and 2000, 2 hip replacement surgeries in the mid-1990s, surgery for a benign brain tumor in 1997, and successful treatment for skin cancer in 2002. She also used a wheelchair due to back problems and was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2004. Taylor passed away from this illness at the age of 79 on March 23, 2011, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, 6 weeks after being hospitalized. Our next actor, though? A total train wreck. Number 9. John Belushi. Comedian, actor, and musician John Belushi was one of the more talented actors in Hollywood's golden era, but he was most known for being one of 7 Saturday Night Live cast members of the first season. His fame, love, and acclaim were probably only matched by Chevy Chase amongst the SNL ensemble. But as his fame grew, he struggled with performer insecurities. He felt resentment towards Chevy Chase, who emerged as the breakout star of SNL's first season. Chase's brief comment in an interview indicates that despite years of working together before SNL, their relationship never fully recovered. He also found drugs as an escape mechanism for his insecurities, a decision that would later take his life. In the early to mid-1970s, Belushi faced health issues due to his escalating drug use. While cocaine was commonly used on the set of Saturday Night Live, Belushi's habit quickly spiraled out of control to the point of snorting cocaine on SNL producer Lorne Michaels' desk. During the Blues Brothers production, director John Landis confronted him after finding a large pile of cocaine in Belushi's trailer, prompting him to tearfully admit his addiction. But don't take this to mean that Belushi was so clandestine about his dangerous acts. The actor was so often late and delayed shooting by wandering off set. Although Belushi managed to quit during the Continental Divide, he relapsed heavily during Neighbors, a cycle that never ended. Belushi was dismissed from Saturday Night Live multiple times, but was rehired each time. Sadly, he died in 1982 from an overdose at the age of 33. Kathy Smith admitted to administering a fatal mixture of heroin and cocaine to Belushi and was later convicted of second-degree murder. Though the sentence was a 15-month prison term, the story behind Belushi's death is even more shocking. On March 4, 1982, Belushi asked his longtime manager, Bernie Brillstein, for money, but Brillstein suspected it was for drugs and initially declined. Later that day, Belushi leveraged the presence of Brillstein's guest to secure money, knowing it would be difficult for him to decline. He was found dead by noon the following day. Number 8. Janice Joplin. Are you even a fan of rock music if you don't like Janice Joplin? We don't think so. One of the most iconic performers of her time, Janice was adored for her powerful mezzo-soprano voice and electrifying stage presence. Yet she woke the world alone, literally. Her undying love for alcohol and drugs summarizes one of her legendary quotes. "On stage, I make love to 25,000 different people, then I go home alone." Janice Joplin's struggles began in childhood with bullying and later escalated to heavy narcotics use as an adult. She often injected methamphetamine and was rarely without her favorite drink, Southern Comfort. Despite multiple efforts to get sober, the influence of her substance-indulging peers made breaking free from her addiction a constant challenge. Worse, she was incredibly impulsive and hedonistic. Many even claimed she had manic depression, attention deficit disorder, and body dysmorphia. Janice Joplin's struggles with substance abuse were well known, spanning opioids, marijuana, and heavy alcohol consumption. However, heroin proved to be her most damaging addiction. She was so down bad that it forced her to cancel multiple shows just because she was too heavily under the influence to take the stage. Sadly, she died of a heroin overdose in 1970 at the age of 27. Her second solo album, Pearl, was released posthumously in 1971 and topped the Billboard 200. Though the life and times of Janice Joplin are deeply intertwined with drugs, it's soothing to know that her name has long been etched in the history books. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995, Joplin was hailed as the Queen of Rock by NPR and ranked among Rolling Stone's greatest artists and singers of all time. She remains one of the best-selling U.S. vocalists with 18.5 million albums certified by the RIAA. Coming next, we have number 7, Billie Holiday. Arguably one of the greatest torch song singers who ever lived, Billie Holiday made a significant contribution to jazz music and pop singing. Her jazz-inspired vocal style created a new way of manipulating phrasing and tempo. But just like Janice Joplin, Holiday had her bright starlight sizzled out because of heroin addiction. Born on April 7, 1915, Holiday passed away at just 44 years old on July 17, 1959. Attempting to frame her life as that of an ordinary woman enduring hardships misses the essence of who she was. Billie was an extraordinary woman with a voice so evocative it touches the deepest corners of human emotion. But while her performances could captivate and deeply move anyone, she herself battled profound emotional struggles she never fully understood. I guess that's the paradox of Billie Holiday, a great yet unfulfilled woman. Holiday had to grow up from a young age. She had little to no parental supervision and had to find a moral compass without training wheels. She was a truant, was arrested as a teenager, and lived life carefree. In 1941, after ending her affair with Tate, Billie married Jimmy Monroe, a small-time drug dealer, and began using opium. However, around 1943 to 44, the wartime scarcity of opium led her to heroin. Initially an occasional user, she eventually fell into full-blown addiction, spending significant amounts of money to fuel her and her new boyfriend, former drug runner Joe Guy, in their intense drug use. Fast forward to May 30, 1959, and Billie Holiday was so deep in drugs that she collapsed and got admitted to Harlem's Knickerbocker Hospital. She made headlines the following month when heroin was found in her room, leading to her arrest and restricted visitors. By the time Holiday died in July, the great singer was a shadow of her former self. She looked weak and drained and had only $848.54 to her name. That said, the most fascinating aspect of Billie Holiday's life was that she was a wonderful artist despite the misery caused by her hedonistic lifestyle. Billie Holiday won 4 posthumous Grammy Awards for Best Historical Album and was inducted into not just the Grammy Hall of Fame, but also the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. She was also named one of NPR's greatest voices and ranked 4th on Rolling Stone's 2023 list of the 200 greatest singers of all time. That she was able to accomplish so much despite the load she had to bear must be her greatest success. Moving on though, let's talk about the life of this figure.
That's love. That's love.
Number 6, Veronica Lake. Surprised to see her here? Born Constance Kiana, Veronica Lake was given her famous stage name by producer Arthur Hornblow Jr., who admired her calm, clear blue eyes. She rose to fame as a teenager with the military drama I Wanted Wings and became one of Hollywood's top box office stars. With her impeccable acting and fashion, it didn't take long for Lake to become a style icon, especially for her peekaboo bang hairstyle, which became so popular during World War II that the U.S. government requested she change it to something more practical for factory work. Speaking of World War II, Veronica Lake toured the country to support the war effort. However, while filming Sullivan's Travels in 1941, she was 6 months pregnant and tried to hide it from director Preston Sturges, who became so furious he had to be physically restrained. It was around this time that Lake earned a reputation for being difficult on set. Unfortunately for her, though, the 1940s came with more trouble. She went into premature labor after tripping over a cable on set in 1943 and lost her second child shortly after birth. Within weeks, she filed for divorce from her husband. After returning to work in 1944, Veronica Lake expressed optimism for a career turnaround, but it wasn't to be. Behind the scenes, Veronica Lake turned to heavy drinking to cope with the emotional toll of losing her child. This got worse as her career declined, coupled with bad press and negative reviews. In 1948, Paramount chose not to renew her contract, and in 1951, her second husband filed for bankruptcy. The IRS subsequently seized their home due to unpaid taxes. To make things worse, Lake's complicated personality, influenced by a pushy stage mother who later claimed Veronica was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 15, didn't help matters. She was arrested multiple times for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. Struggling with alcoholism throughout her life, she tragically passed away at the age of 50 in 1973 from acute hepatitis and kidney failure. But here's where things get interesting. Veronica Lake was also addicted to antidepressant drugs behind the scenes. In fact, the toxicology report of her death was an accidental overdose of the antidepressant tofranil. That was the true reason why she died. Number 5. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift, a 4-time Oscar nominee who passed away at 45, was a talented young actor, a tabloid sensation, and a posthumous gay icon. But his life is a somber reminder that even when you seem to be on the right path, life can still take unexpected and challenging turns fast. Born in 1920 in Omaha, Nebraska, Montgomery Clift was raised in an aristocratic lifestyle with a private tutor and frequent trips to Europe. Though he didn't excel in school, his acting talent was evident from an early age. At 15, he made his Broadway debut in Cole Porter's Jubilee and earned prominent roles in plays by Tennessee Williams and Thornton Wilder in the next decade. Starring alongside stars like Frederick March and Tallulah Bankhead, Montgomery Clift was at the absolute peak of the industry, with his life very much ahead of him. But a devastating car crash in 1956 changed the course of his life forever. Feeling down, sad, and weak, Clift turned to prescription drug addiction and alcohol as a coping mechanism. Life was coming at him fast, and he needed it to stop. Sadly, it spiraled out of control. Clift's doctors allegedly told the actor he was lucky to be alive, and boy is it hard to blame them. It took months of surgeries, rebuilding, and physical therapy to get his face back on track. Studio heads even feared Raintree County would fail because Clift's face was disfigured. In hindsight, though, his face wasn't so bad. He lost the youthful, unblemished face he once had, but he looked aged due to the facial reconstruction, heavy painkiller use, and rampant alcohol abuse. Infamously remembered as the longest self-univalent in Hollywood history, Montgomery Clift was hooked on pills, alcohol, and barbiturates until his death. A heart attack at the age of 45 in 1966. Some say his addiction likely sped up his passing. While you ponder the veracity of the rumors, why don't you take a second or two to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell? It's free and would keep you in the loop for more fascinating Hollywood stories. You don't want to miss it, do you? Subscribe already.
May I ask you a question?
You can ask your questions later.
No, now. Now! Right now! I want to ask my questions now and
Number 4. Peter Lorre. Known for his sly yet timid characters, distinctive appearance, and accented voice, Peter Lorre became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood despite not being fully American. He left Germany after Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power and settled in Hollywood, where he eventually featured in crime and mystery films. His early American roles in Mad Love and Crime and Punishment, both in 1935, saw him continue his portrayal of murderers. Then he later starred as Mr. Moto, a Japanese detective, in a series of B films. From 1941 to 1946, Lorre worked mainly with Warner Brothers, debuting in The Maltese Falcon, his first of many collaborations with Humphrey Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet. He followed this with Casablanca and other notable works like Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Though he was mostly typecast as a sinister foreigner, the latter part of his career was erratic. Lorre endured chronic gallbladder issues, leading to a morphine prescription that resulted in addiction. He fought hard to overcome this dependency during the Mr. Moto films, but he never won. The 100 pounds he gained during this time was the least of his worries. Morphine addiction, stemming from a botched intestinal operation in the 1920s, heavy drinking, chain smoking, mounting alimony, and the collapse of his production company left Peter Lorre grappling with a massive decline in wealth, health, and career. Peter Lorre passed away from a stroke on March 23, 1964, in Los Angeles. His ashes were interred at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and his funeral eulogy was delivered by fellow actor Vincent Price. Number 3. Barbara Payton. When it comes to Hollywood bombshells, only a few come close to Barbara Payton. The blonde superstar had the world at her feet, and she was tipped to rival even Marilyn Monroe. yet she gained infamy for being one of Hollywood's most tragic cautionary tales. But how exactly did that happen? Hailing from Minnesota, Barbara Payton starred alongside Lloyd Bridges in Trapped, James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, and Gregory Peck in Only the Valiant. However, not even she could resist the temptations of Hollywood. Celebrity bartender and self-described hustler Scotty Bowers claimed that Barbara Payton was once a highly sought-after call girl. She also quickly developed a penchant for partying hard and was rumored to have used relationships with film moguls to advance her career. While many of these claims remain unverified, Payton undeniably raised eyebrows in Tinseltown for her booze drinking and drug addiction. Between 1955 and 1963, Payton's struggles with alcohol and drug addiction resulted in numerous legal troubles, including an arrest on Sunset Boulevard for escort services. In 1956, Barbara Payton's ex-husband accused her of neglecting their son, who had been in her care since the age of 4. The ensuing custody battle saw allegations of exposing the child to immoral behavior and an unstable environment. The judge ultimately sided with the father, deeming Barbara an unfit mother and describing her as a thoroughly confused and misguided young woman. Would you blame him, though? Barbara Payton was arrested for shoplifting an outfit of clothing in 1964 and then for possession of heroin and a hypodermic syringe the following year, though the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. She died on May 8, 1967, due to congestive heart failure. But if you think her life had a haunting decline, you've seen nothing yet. Keep your tissues close for this actress. Number 2. Frances Farmer. Born September 19, 1913, Frances Elena Farmer was an American actress who starred in a dozen feature films over the course of her career. However, both her talent and appeal were equally matched by the infamy she gained throughout the course of her career. From sensationalized accounts of her life to involuntary commitments to psychiatric hospitals and even mental health struggles, Frances Farmer always felt like she was taking a step forward and 2 steps back. Struggling with heavy drinking and growing dependence on amphetamines, Farmer started using Benzedrine shortly after arriving in Hollywood. The drug, commonly prescribed as an appetite suppressant at the time, was widely available, but it wasn't until the 1970s that the addictive nature of amphetamines and their potential to cause schizophrenia-like symptoms became known. It remains unclear whether Farmer's struggles were due to mental illness or the effects of alcohol and drug abuse. However, her downward spiral worsened on October 19, 1942, when she was stopped by a policeman in Santa Monica for driving with her headlights on in a wartime dim-out zone. After an altercation during which she reportedly told the officer, "You bore me," she was arrested for drunken driving, driving without a license, and violating dim-out restrictions. She was fined $250 and her sentence of 180 days in jail was suspended. That same year, reports of her erratic behavior began to surface, leading to multiple arrests and commitments to psychiatric institutions. Farmer was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and at her family's request, particularly her mother's, she was involuntarily admitted to an institution in Washington where she remained until 1950. 20 years later, Farmer was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, which was attributed to a life of heavy smoking. She was hospitalized for a few weeks until she died on the 1st of August, 1970. A 1978 biography, Shadowland, claimed that Farmer underwent a transorbital lobotomy during her involuntary institutionalization. Though the author later admitted in court to fabricating events in the book, a 1982 biographical film based on the book portrayed these incidents as true. But what do you think, though? Could the nasty rumors have been true after all? While you're pondering your answer, check out our final pick. Number 1. Judy Garland. With the way Judy Garland burst onto the scene, she could have been the greatest woman in Hollywood's rich history. The teenage star had the world at her feet after The Wizard of Oz, but despite the early success, she faced overwhelming struggles, including addiction, financial ruin, and near homelessness. Born in 1922, Garland was introduced to show business at a young age by her vaudeville parents, but her childhood was marred by exploitation. Her mother pushed her into stardom, feeding her amphetamines to keep her active and sleeping pills to help her rest. She was signed by MGM at the age of 13, where she was put through a grueling schedule, frequently working as the girl next door in 2 or 3 films simultaneously. Her day began with 3 hours of school, followed by singing rehearsals, and then hours of shooting, sometimes lasting until 5 a.m. Coping was impossible, so she relied on a diet of pills, becoming dependent on them by the age of 15. Remember the 1939 masterpiece, The Wizard of Oz? Garland shone like a million stars at only 16, at the cost of her well-being behind the scenes. Her role was originally intended for Shirley Temple, so to make her appear younger, the studio put her on a strict diet of chicken soup, black coffee, 80 cigarettes, diet pills, and amphetamines. Her waist was tightly corseted, and prosthetics were used to alter her nose. Heavily drugged on a slurry of medications she had been legally prescribed by her quack doctors since her earliest days at MGM, Judy Garland struggled through her lines and songs. Her personal battles were compounded by a volatile relationship with the troubled, alcoholic director Busby Berkeley, with whom she had a history of conflict dating. By the time she was in her 30s, Judy Garland was already a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict, in an era when many viewed addiction as a moral failing rather than recognizing it as a genuine disease affecting the mind, body, and soul. Sadly, she died from an accidental barbiturate overdose in 1969 at age 47. The autopsy also revealed that Garland's body showed signs of cirrhosis of the liver, a consequence of her heavy drinking, which may have ultimately claimed her life if the pills hadn't taken their toll first. Garland was nearly homeless at the time of her death and owed thousands in back taxes to the IRS. She was everything no one expected, a shadow of her former self. What's sad is how differently her life could have turned out had she been surrounded by good people. We had a blast making this video, but now it's your turn to keep the conversation going. Which of these stories stayed with you the most? Is there anyone you wish we had included? Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Craving more hidden Hollywood secrets? You're just one click away. Grab a snack and dive into the next video on your screen.